I fixed it. Let's go. Okay. Hi, everyone. I want to inspire you to make art about tiny birds and also give you some tools for it. To tell little stories like, for example, the snail exploring a little moss forest. My name is Rick, and I'm a freelance environment artist with a love for nature and cute stuff. Here's some of my work. I really love making like cute little plants, working with substance designer, and also putting cute faces on things. And I also used to be a macro photographer some years ago. And back then I did a tiny bird series where the whole idea is basically that you have this feeling like you're actually standing maybe at the size of a mouse or a little bug in this little macro world. And I want to inspire you and give you like some ideas what I find fascinating and magical about those tiny birds. One thing I find really interesting is if you take something familiar and put it in a different context, so something from our everyday life. For example, everyone knows like a button, a yarn, a pine cone, but putting it in this different context, it instantly has some magic to it because it breaks with our expectation. Or another example would be everyone knows a letter, but putting it in this unexpected forest context, there's like the story developing there. You're thinking, hey, did a lover lose it maybe in the forest, or is it a love letter from the forest to us? We don't know, but we know that there's a story there. Another thing I find really interesting about tiny words is if we take the big word, like built spaces, especially like houses, towers, and so on, and mirror it in the small natural world. So for example, this is a photo I took some years ago, and it's actually not Photoshop. I found it with this little window like this. And because it resembles kind of human-built spaces, you start imagining like little humanoid characters living here, and there's a lot of magic in that, especially if you don't show them as well. Or another example, you could also go the way to like humanify or personify, I guess, animals by putting them kind of in this human context, for example, like riding like a little walnut boat like this. But yeah, how do you actually get this tiny bird feel like once you have like a story that you want to tell? And I think there's like 3 points for it for me. And also like there's not 3 points for it to me. There's like 2 points. First off, I want to highlight the tiny scale. And the other thing is I really want to feel like I am standing there. So I mentioned already like kind of at the size of a mouse or a little bug. We don't want to have the feeling like we are this human, like looking from the top, basically. One thing to highlight the scale is really to use objects that people are familiar with, because like macro scenes can get quite abstract, especially if you photograph like, for example, moss or something like this. So this can be man-made objects. So for example, in this case, there's some bricks here, or it could also be a matchbox, for example. It just needs to be something that like makes sense in the scene. So don't like force it in there. For more natural scenes, obviously you could use mushrooms, snails, and so on. Then the other thing is like the feeling like actually standing there. There's 3 points to that. So one thing is using a wide or a standard lens, because like traditionally like long lenses, and this is like something that applies to games as well. Traditionally long lenses are used for something which we can't like get close to, so like paparazzi, safaris, and so on. So to show you a comparison, this is like with a 35mm lens, so kind of wide lens, sort of. And this is like with a more longer lens. And I actually quite like this effect because through this distance it creates, it feels like quite ethereal. But like if I want to feel like I'm actually part of the scene, I would use like a wider lens like this. And obviously like cameras is also something we use in games. Also really important is to put the camera close to the ground. In a game, this kind of comes with putting a player character in the scene, but basically you use that to make things feel bigger than they actually are and kind of ground the viewer and the player in the scene as well. So this shot wouldn't work if you look like from the top on a tower, then it wouldn't like feel like a little tower. It only works because the camera is actually like close to the ground, like looking up. And the last thing, but this applies more like if your camera is kind of like on like one layer or like static, is to have like a strong foreground, midground, background, just so it feels like it's actually like a world which you can explore, like a little moss forest, for example. And just to sum it up quickly, I think it's really interesting to take something familiar and kind of break with expectations, mirror the big build space in a small, do something to highlight the tiny scale as well, so you actually feel like it's a tiny bird, and then create this feeling like actually like a little mouse basically in the scene. And these are some plans I made recently, which are game ready. And yeah, I'm a 3D freelance artist, so you can hire me. Just send me an email at contact@tinybirds.org, and you can also follow me at Twitter @tinyruin. That's all from me. Thank you.